The Grand Assembly Hall of the Valor. Dominion was a place built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were covered with the flags of 200 conquered worlds, each one a reminder of Valorian power. The floor was made from black stone, taken from dead planets, polished until it reflected the light of 1,000 floating lanterns. High Commander the Zarin stood at the center of this great hall. He was tall even by Valorian standards, with pale gray skin and 4 eyes that glowed with a soft blue light. His military uniform was covered with medals from a dozen successful campaigns. He had never known defeat. He had never even come close to it. Around him sat the Elder Council, 12 ancient Valyrians, who ruled the Dominion with absolute power. They were old and tired, but their minds were still sharp. They had built an empire that stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. They had crushed every enemy who dared to stand against them. Today the Zarin would ask them for permission to expand that empire even further. Honored elders, he began, his voice filling the massive chamber, I come before you with a proposal that will secure our dominance for the next 10,000 years. He waved his hand and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared in the air above him. It showed the Valorian Dominion in bright purple, spreading across vast regions of space like a growing stain. But there was one area that remained dark, unmarked, unknown. The Orion Spur, the Zarin said, pointing to the dark region. For millennia this area has remained unexplored. Our ancestors declared it off limits. They called it the quarantine zone. They told us to stay away. He paused for effect, letting his words sink in. But our ancestors were afraid of shadow. They were superstitious. They believed in stories and legends rather than facts and science. I have studied this region carefully. I have analyzed every piece of data we have, and I have found nothing to justify their fear. The Elder Council members exchanged glances. The oldest among them, a female named Vethsara, leaned forward in her Zeta. The quarantine zone has been in place for 12,000 years, she said. Our ancestors were not fools. They must have had a reason. With respect, Elder Vethsara, they had no reason. The Zarin replied. They had rumors, they had myths. They had stories told by primitive species who feared anything they did not understand, but they had no real evidence of any threat. He changed the holographic display, showing a small yellow star surrounded by 8 planets. This is the Sol system located at the heart of the quarantine zone. Our long-range sensors have detected signs of intelligent life on the 3rd planet from the star. They call it Earth. They call themselves humans. The image zoomed in on a blue and green world covered with oceans and continents. It looked peaceful. It looked harmless. Our scans show that these humans have achieved only basic space travel. The Zarin continued. They have sent a few primitive probes to nearby planets. They have placed a small number of satellites in orbit around their world. They have even managed to land a handful of their kind on their single moon. He laughed, and several council members laughed with him. This is the great threat that our ancestors feared. Species that struggles to reach their own moon. They are children playing with toys. They are nothing compared to the might of the Valorian Dominion. And yet, came a quiet voice from the back of the hall, you should not go. There, everyone turned to look at the speaker. He was not Valorian, he was a Kreth, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His body was small and hunched, covered with wrinkled brown skin. His eyes were large and dark, filled with an ancient sadness. He walked slowly toward the center of the hall, leaning on a staff made from the bone of some long-dead creature. The Zarin frowned. Ambassador Yethkrol, this is a military matter. The Kreth collective has no voice here. I am not speaking for the collective. The old ambassador said, I am speaking for myself, and I am speaking for the countless millions who died the last time someone ignored the warnings about Earth. The hall fell silent. Even the elder council members stopped, whispering among themselves. What do you mean? Vithsara asked. What? Millions. Yethkrol reached the center of the hall and stood before the Zarin. Despite his small size, there was something powerful about him. Something that made even the High Commander take a step back. I am old, Yethkrol said. Very old. I have lived for nearly 8,000 years, but even I was not alive during the First Contact War. I only know what was passed down to me by my teachers who learned it from their teachers who learned it from those who survived. He closed his eyes as if remembering something painful. 10,000 years ago, a species called the Zethari ruled this region of the galaxy. They were powerful, they were advanced. They had technology that makes your ships look like children's toys. They discovered the humans when your ancestors were still learning to use fire. The Zarin crossed his arms. I have never heard of the Zethari. Of course you haven't, Yethkrol said, because they no longer exist. The humans destroyed them, every ship, every colony, every male, female, and child. They erased the Zethari from the galaxy so completely that only a few of us even remember their name. Several council members gasped. The Zarin shook his head in disbelief. Impossible, you said yourself that this happened 10,000 years ago. The humans we scan can barely reach their own moon. How could they have destroyed an advanced civilization? Because 10,000 years ago the humans were more advanced than they are now. Yethkrol explained. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They had weapons that could crack planets in half. They were the most powerful species anyone had ever seen. Then what happened to them? Vithsara asked. Why are they so primitive now? Yethkrol was quiet for a long moment before answering. After the war with the Zethari, the humans looked at what they had done. They looked at the destruction they had caused, and they were horrified. They realized that their power made them a threat to every other species in the galaxy, so they made a choice. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every council member. They chose to forget. They destroyed their own ships. They erased their own history. They buried their technology so deep that even they could not find it. They went back to their home world and started over as if they were a new species that had never left the ground. The Zarin laughed out loud. You expect us to believe that the most powerful species in the galaxy chose to become primitive, that they gave up their technology because they felt bad about winning a war? This is nonsense. This is a fairy tale designed to scare children. It is the truth, Yethkrol said firmly. And there is more. Before they buried their weapons, the humans left behind guardians, automatic systems designed to Watch for threats, defense platforms, hidden in asteroids, kill satellites, sleeping in the darkness between stars. They are still out there. Waiting. Waiting for what? For anyone foolish enough to threaten. Earth again, the Zarin turned to face. The Elder Council, honored elders, you have heard the ambassador's story. It is a fascinating tale, I admit, but it is nothing more than that, a tale. A legend. There is no evidence that any of this actually happened. The evidence was destroyed, Yethkro said, by the humans themselves, that is the point. How convenient, the Zarin replied with a smirk, a threat with no proof, a danger that cannot be verified. Ambassador, if the Kreth Collective wants to hide in their corner of the galaxy afraid of ancient stories, that is your choice, but the Valorian Dominion does not run from shadows. He turned back to the holographic display, expanding it to show his invasion plans. I propose to send the first expeditionary fleet to the Sol system. 400 warships carrying 1 million soldiers, and enough firepower to conquer any world in the galaxy. We will subdue the humans, claim their planet, and open up the entire Orion spur for colonization. And if the ambassador is right, Visera asked, what if there are hidden weapons? What if the humans are more dangerous than they appear? The Zarin smiled confidently. Then we will destroy them. Our ships have shields that can withstand nuclear explosions. Our soldiers have armor that can stop any projectile. Our commanders have centuries of combat experience. Even if the humans have a few surprises, they cannot possibly stand against the full might of the Dominion. He looked directly at Yethkro. I do not fear ghosts, ambassador. I do not fear stories. I fear nothing. The old Kreth stared back at him with those ancient sad eyes. That is exactly what the Zethari said. Right before they died, the Elder Council voted. It was not close. 11 of the 12 members voted in favor of the invasion. Only Vethsara voted against, and even she did so without much conviction. The Zarin was given command of the first expeditionary fleet. He would leave within the week. As the council members filed out of the hall, Yethkro remained behind. He stood in the center of that great chamber, surrounded by the flags of conquered worlds, and he felt a deep sadness in his heart. His aide, a young Kreth named Shavin, approached him carefully. Ambassador, are you all right? No, Yethkro said quietly. I am not all right. I have just watched an entire civilization sign its own death warrant. You think the High Commander will fail? I think the High Commander will die, along with his fleet, along with his soldiers, along with any hope the Valyrians had of surviving as a species. Shavin looked confused. But surely you're exaggerating. Even if the humans have some hidden weapons, the Valyrians are powerful. They have conquered 200 worlds, and the Zethari had conquered 3,000. Yethkro replied, it did not save them. He began walking toward the exit, his staff clicking against the polished floor with each step. The Valyrians have made a mistake that cannot be undone. They have looked at the humans and seen only what the humans want them to see. They see primitive technology. They see a species struggling to reach their own moon. They see an easy target. He stopped at the doorway and looked back at the empty hall. But I have studied the humans for centuries. I have watched them from afar. I have seen what they do when no one is looking, and I know the truth." "What truth?" Shavin asked. "The humans did not forget how to build starships. They did not forget how to make weapons they buried there. Technology, yes, but they remembered where they buried it. They have been watching the galaxy all this time, waiting for someone to threaten them again. And when that threat comes, they will dig up their weapons, they will rebuild their fleets, and they will remind the galaxy why the quarantine zone exists." He stepped through the doorway and began the long walk back to his ship. "Mark this day, Shavin, mark it well, because today is the day the Valerian Dominion chose its own destruction. Today is the day that everything changed." Far away on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, the humans went about their daily lives. They worked in their offices, they played with their children, they ate their meals and slept in their beds, just as they had done for thousands of years, but deep beneath the surface of their world, in bunkers that no satellite could see, machines that had been sleeping for millennia began to wake up. Lights flickered on in ancient command centers, computers that predated human civilization hummed back to life. Weapon systems that had been buried for 10,000 years started their activation sequences in a chamber carved from solid rock 3 km beneath the Swiss Alps. A message appeared on a screen that had not been used since before the pyramids were built. "Alert, hostile fleet detected in outer galaxy, bearing Valerian Dominion, estimated arrival 6 months, threat assessment moderate, response protocol initiated." Admiral Chen Wei Lin was the first human to see the message. She had been chosen for this role before she was born, selected from a bloodline that stretched back to the original defense commanders. She had trained her entire life for this moment, even though part of her had always hoped it would never come. She read the message 3 times, making sure she understood it completely. Then she picked up a phone that connected her to every world leader on the planet. "This is Admiral Chen," she said, her voice calm and steady. "The waiting is over. They are coming. Begin full activation of all defense systems. Wake up the sleepers. Prepare the Shadow Fleet. It's time to remind the galaxy who we really are, across the Earth, in hidden bases on every continent. Men and women who had been waiting their entire lives received the same message. They said goodbye to their families. They put on uniforms that had not been worn in generations. They walked into bunkers and sealed the doors behind them. The humans had been pretending to be primitive for a very long time. They had let the galaxy think they were weak. They had let their enemies underestimate them. Now finally, the pretending was over. The High Commander of the Valerian Dominion had been warned. He had been told to stay away from Earth's region. He had been given every chance to turn back. He had chosen not to listen, and that choice would cost him everything. 6 months passed like a heartbeat. The first expeditionary fleet of the Valerian Dominion crossed the vast emptiness between stars. 400 warships moving in perfect formation. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Each ship a mountain of metal and fire, bristling with weapons that could crack open moons. High Commander the Xeron stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. It was the largest warship ever built by the Dominion, nearly 5 km long and carrying enough firepower to destroy a Small planet. He had commanded it for 30 years, and in that time it had never failed him. Reports, he ordered. His second in command, a female named Kethvara, checked her displays. We are approaching the outer boundary of the Sol system, High Commander. Long-range sensors show no enemy ships, no orbital defenses, no sign that they even know we are coming. The Xeron allowed himself a small smile. Exactly as I expected, the humans are blind and deaf. They probably cannot even detect our ships at this distance. He walked to the main viewing window and looked out at the darkness of space. Somewhere ahead, beyond the range of his eyes, was a small blue planet full of beings who did not know they were about to be conquered. Begin the standard approach pattern, he ordered. I want all weapons charged and ready. We will announce ourselves when we reach the fourth planet. The fleet moved forward. They passed the cold, distant rocks at the edge of the system. They passed frozen balls of ice and gas that drifted in the eternal night. They saw nothing unusual. They detected nothing threatening. On the bridge of the eternal conquest, officers went about their duties with calm efficiency. They had done this many times before. Conquering new worlds was routine for them, but something was different this time. Something that made the hair on the Xeron's neck stand up, even though he could not explain why. It was too quiet. Every other system they had invaded had shown some reaction to their arrival. Panicked radio transmissions, desperate attempts at communication, ships fleeing toward the inner planets. Something. But the Sol system was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Are our sensors working properly? The Xeron asked. Kethvara checked her instruments. Yes. High Commander, all systems are functioning perfectly. Then why are the humans not responding? We are not exactly hiding. They should be able to see us by now. Perhaps they do not have sensors capable of detecting us at this range, Kethvara suggested. Perhaps, the Xeron said. But he did not sound convinced. The fleet continued forward. They passed the orbit of the eighth planet, a beautiful blue giant with rings of ice around it. Still nothing, no response, no sign of life. Then, without warning, one of their ships disappeared. The Xeron did not even realize what had happened at first. One moment the cruiser named Sword of Victory was moving in formation with the rest of the fleet. The next moment it was gone. No explosion, no debris, just empty space. Where a ship had been, what happened? The Xeron demanded. Where is the Sword of Victory? Officers scrambled to check their readings. Confusion spread across the bridge like a disease. I do not know, High Commander, Kethvara said, her voice shaking. One moment it was there, the next moment it was not. We detected no weapons fire, no energy signature of any kind. Ships do not just disappear, the Xeron shouted. Find out what happened, now. Before anyone could respond, another ship vanished, then another, then two more at the same time, across the fleet. Panic began to set in. Commanders screamed orders at their crews. Gunners fired blindly into empty space, hoping to hit something, anything. But there was nothing to hit, no enemy ships, no missiles, no weapons, just darkness and silence and death. On the bridge of the eternal conquest, the Xeron watched in horror as his fleet was taken apart piece by piece. 10 ships gone, 20, 30. What is doing this? He demanded. Where is the enemy? "High Commander, I think I have found something," one of his officers said. His voice was barely above a whisper, as if he was afraid to speak too loudly. "Look at this." He transferred an image to the main display screen. It showed a section of space near one of the destroyed ships, magnified thousands of times. At first, the Xeron saw nothing unusual. Then the image shifted and he saw it. Shape black against black, moving through the void like a predator, stalking its prey. It was a ship, but like no ship he had ever seen. It was angular and sharp, designed to be invisible rather than impressive. It had no running lights, no visible engines, no markings of any kind. It was a shadow with teeth. "They have stealth ships," the Xeron said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "The humans have ships we cannot see." As if hearing his words, the black shape turned toward the camera and fired. The image went dead. 37 ships were gone by the time the Xeron managed to restore order to his fleet. 37 ships destroyed without a single enemy vessel appearing on their sensors. It was impossible. It was humiliating. And it was only the beginning. "All ships full alert," he ordered. "Activate thermal imaging. Switch to passive sensors only. Find those shadow ships." The fleet spread out, searching for enemies they could not see. For hours they swept through the empty space around them, firing at every shadow, every flicker of movement that might be a hidden ship. They found nothing, but the humans found them. The attacks came without warning and without pattern. A ship would simply explode, hit by weapons that traveled faster than light and struck before anyone could react. Sometimes whole squadrons would vanish at once, caught in traps that had been laid centuries before any Valorian was born. The Xeron watched his fleet shrink with each passing hour. 50 ships gone. 70, 100. "High Commander," Kethabar said, "I am detecting something strange in the asteroid belt ahead." "What is it?" "Movement. Lots of movement. Hundreds of objects, all accelerating toward our position." The Xeron felt his heart sink. "Show me." The main screen changed to show the asteroid belt that circled the yellow sun. At first it looked normal, just millions of rocks tumbling through space as they had done for billions of years. But then the image zoomed in and the Xeron saw the truth. The asteroids were opening up. Great sections of rock split apart like hatching eggs, revealing the machines hidden inside. Ships, weapons platforms, missile launchers, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all emerging from hiding places where they had waited for who knows how long. "It is a trap," the Xeron whispered. "The entire asteroid belt is a trap." The first missiles arrived moments later. They were small and fast, almost impossible to track. They did not carry explosives. They did not need to. They were moving so fast that the impact alone was enough to tear through Valorian armor like paper. Ships exploded all around the eternal conquest. The void was filled with fire and debris and the screams of dying soldiers. "Return fire," the Xeron shouted. "Destroy those platforms." His gunners tried. They really did. They poured enough firepower into the asteroid belt to destroy a moon, but for every platform they hit, 10 more emerged from hiding. For every missile they shot down, 100 more were launched. The humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries, maybe longer. They had turned their entire solar system into a weapon filled with traps and hidden guns and ships that could strike without being seen. And the Zarin had walked right into it. "High Commander, we are receiving a transmission," an officer reported. "It is coming from the third planet, from Earth." "Put it on screen." The face of a human female appeared on the display. She had dark hair and dark eyes and a calm expression that showed no fear. She was wearing a military uniform, covered with symbols that the Zarin did not recognize. "Greetings, High Commander," she said. "I am Admiral Chen Wei Lin of the Earth Defense Force. I believe you have come to conquer our planet." The Zarin gathered what remained of his dignity. "I am High Commander the Zarin of the Valorian Dominion. And yes, I have come to claim this world. For my people, surrender now and your species will be treated fairly. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Let me show you something, High Commander." The image changed. It showed recordings of human history, wars, battles, destruction on a scale that made the Zarin's hearts freeze. He saw humans fighting other humans in trenches filled with mud and blood. He saw cities burning under clouds of fire. He saw weapons that could destroy entire continents. He saw death and suffering and violence beyond anything he had ever imagined. "This is what we do to each other," Admiral Chen said, "for fun, for pride, for reasons we cannot even remember. We have been killing each other since the beginning of our species. We have invented a million different ways to cause pain and death, and we are very, very good at it." The recordings continued, soldiers charging into certain death with smiles on their faces, pilots flying their damaged ships directly into enemy targets, warriors fighting to the last breath, refusing to surrender even when all hope was lost. "Your mistake, High Commander, was thinking that numbers matter to us, that we would calculate the odds and surrender when the math turned against us. But we do not think like that. We never have." She leaned closer to the camera, and her eyes seemed to burn with a fire that the Zarin could feel even across the vast distance between them. "We are not your first war. We will not be your last, but we will be the war that ends your empire. We will be the nightmare that haunts your children for generations. We will be the reason that every species in the galaxy learns to fear the small blue planet at the edge of the Orion Spur." The transmission ended. The Zarin stood in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet. More than half his ships were gone. The survivors were scattered and confused, fighting an enemy they could not see against traps they could not detect. "High Commander," Kethabar said softly, "what are your orders?" He wanted to retreat. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn around and run, to get as far away from this cursed system as possible. But he could not. The Valorian Dominion did not retreat. They had never retreated. To do so would be to admit defeat, and defeat was unacceptable. "We continue the attack," he said, his voice hollow. "Send a message to the Dominion. Tell them we have encountered unexpected resistance. Tell them to send the second fleet as reinforcement." "High Commander, the second fleet has 600 ships. Even if they come, will it be enough?" The Zarin did not answer, because deep in his hearts he already knew the truth. It would not be enough. Nothing would be enough. Far away in a command bunker buried beneath the mountains of Earth, Admiral Chen watched the Valorian fleet struggle to survive. Her officers cheered with each enemy ship destroyed. They celebrated each successful trap, each hidden weapon that found its target. But Chen did not celebrate. Her face remained calm and serious as she studied the tactical displays. They are calling for reinforcements. One of her officers reported, the Second Fleet, 600 ships. Good, Chen said. That means they are scared. Scared enemies make mistakes. Admiral, should we finish off the first fleet now? We have the firepower. Chen shook her head. No, let them suffer. Let them bleed. Let them report back to their masters about what they found. Here, the more afraid they are, the more ships they will send, and the more ships they send, the more we can destroy. She turned to face her command staff, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. We have been hiding for 10,000 years, pretending to be weak, pretending to be primitive. We let the galaxy forget what we truly are, but now the time for hiding is over. She pointed at the tactical display, where the remains of the Valorian fleet drifted among the debris of their fallen comrades. This is just the beginning. Before this war is over, every species in the galaxy will know the truth about humanity. They will know that we are not prey. We are not victims. We are not a species to be conquered. Her voice rose, filled with a fury that had been building for millennia. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We always have been, and it is time for the universe to remember why they should be afraid of the dark. Outside, in the vast emptiness of space, the hunting continued. Human ships moved through the shadows, striking and vanishing, killing without mercy. Automated weapons fired from hiding places that had waited centuries for targets. The Sol system had become a killing ground, and the Valorians were the prey. The Second Fleet would arrive in 3 months. The humans were already preparing their welcome. The war room was buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. It had been built 10,000 years ago, carved from solid rock by machines that modern humans could not even imagine. It had waited all that time, sleeping in the darkness, maintaining itself with power drawn from the planet's core. Now it was awake, and it was hungry for war. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin walked through corridors that hummed with ancient energy. Around her, screens showed information from across the solar system. Troop movements, weapon status, enemy positions. The entire battle was laid out before her like a game board, but this was no game. People were dying, ships were burning, and the real fight had not even begun. She entered the main command center, vast circular room filled with officers working at stations that combined technology from 2 different ages. Some of the equipment was modern, built in the last few decades, but some of it was ancient, preserved from the time before humanity chose to forget. General Marcus Stone looked up as she entered. He was an old man with white hair and a face like cracked leather. He had spent 40 years preparing for this day. Admiral, he said, the Second Fleet has been confirmed, 600 ships arriving in 92 days. Good. Chen took her seat at the center of the room. Status of our forces. All shadow fleets are in position. The asteroid defenses have been fully activated. The Uit cloud network is online and tracking all incoming vessels. Stone pulled up a display showing the solar system, red dots marked enemy ships, blue dots marked human forces. There were many more blue dots than red. The Valyrians have no idea what they are walking into. Stone continued, they think they are coming to reinforce battle. They do not realize they are walking into an execution. Chen nodded, but her expression remained serious. What about the sleepers? Stone's face changed. For a moment, something like awe crossed his weathered features. They are waking all across the planet, all across the system. Soldiers who have been in stasis for centuries, waiting for this exact moment. The sleepers, Chen had seen the files, had studied the history that most humans had forgotten. 10,000 years ago, when humanity decided to hide itself from the galaxy, not everyone agreed. Some warriors refused to give up the fight. They believed that one day enemies would come again and humanity would need soldiers who remembered the old ways. So they volunteered to sleep, to be frozen in chambers scattered throughout the solar system, waiting for the day when they would be needed. Tens of thousands of them, warriors from an age when humans conquered stars and broke empires. Now they were waking up and they were angry. Show me the moon, Chen ordered. The display shifted to show Earth's moon. But it was not the dead gray rock that most humans knew. Beneath its surface, hidden for millennia, was the largest military installation humanity had ever built. Fortress Luna, the last line of defense. For Earth, a hollowed-out moon filled with weapons, ships, and soldiers. It could withstand a siege that lasted centuries. It could project power across the entire solar system. It was humanity's final secret, kept hidden even from most humans themselves. The fortress is at full alert, Stone reported. All weapons are charged, all defense grids are active. If the Valyrians somehow get past our outer defenses, Fortress Luna will destroy them. Chen stared at the display for a long moment. You know, Marcus, when I was young, I used to wonder if this day would ever come. I used to hope it would not. I wanted to believe that we could stay hidden forever, that no one would ever find us. And now I realize that hiding was never really an option. Sooner or later, someone was going to come for us. Sooner or later, we were going to have to show the galaxy what we truly are. She stood up and walked to a different display, one that showed the history of human warfare. Images flashed across the screen. Ancient battles fought with swords and spears, modern wars waged with bombs and bullets, future conflicts using weapons that most humans had never seen. Do you know why the Valyrians think they can conquer us, Marcus? Stone shook his head. Because they look at us and they see species that kills itself. They see our wars, our conflicts, our endless violence against each other. They think it makes us weak. They think it means we are divided, unable to work together against a common enemy. She turned to face him and her eyes were hard as steel. But they have made the same mistake that every alien species makes. They have failed to understand what our violence really means. What does it mean, Admiral? It means we have had millions of years of practice. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Every other species in the galaxy evolved in environments where cooperation was the key to survival. They learned to work together, to avoid conflict, to surrender when fighting. Became too costly, but not us. We evolved as predators. We evolved by fighting everything, including each other. She pointed at the display showing Valyrian ships. The Valyrians have been conquering worlds for 3,000 years. They have perfected the art of overwhelming force. They show up with more ships, more soldiers, more guns than their enemies can possibly defeat. And they wait for surrender. It has worked every single time. Her smile grew wider. But it will not work against us because we do not surrender. We do not calculate the odds and decide that fighting is hopeless. We fight until we win or until we die. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. Stone nodded slowly. The Zathari learned that lesson 10,000 years ago. Yes, they did, and the Valyrians are about to learn it again. An alarm sounded across the command center. Officers rushed to their stations as new information flooded in. Admiral, one of them called out, the First Fleet is making a move. They are advancing toward Mars. Chen returned to her seat. Show me. The display changed to show the inner solar system, the remains of the Valyrian First Fleet, barely 150 ships, were moving toward the Red Planet. They were staying close together, trying to protect each other from the shadow ships that hunted them. They are trying to establish a base on Mars, Stone said, probably hoping to hold out until reinforcements arrive. Let them land, Chen ordered. Let them think they have found safety. Stone raised an eyebrow. Admiral, we have assets on Mars that they do not know about, underground bunkers hidden, weapons, soldiers who have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Let the Valyrians land. Let them think they have won a small victory, and then show them how wrong they are. The First Fleet reached Mars and began landing operations. They set up bases on the surface. They established defensive positions around their ships. They sent patrols out to explore the barren landscape. They found nothing. No enemies, no traps, no sign of human presence. They began to relax. They began to believe that maybe they had finally found a safe place. They were wrong. The first attack came at night. Not that there was really night on Mars, but the Valyrians had established a day and night cycle for their troops to keep them fresh and alert. When the majority of their soldiers sleeping, the humans struck. They came from beneath the ground. Tunnels that had been dug thousands of years ago opened up beneath Valyrian bases. Human soldiers poured out wearing armor that made them invisible to Valyrian sensors, carrying weapons that fired projectiles too fast to dodge. The fighting was brutal. The Valyrians were trained soldiers experienced in dozens of campaigns, but they had never faced anything like this. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like animals, like demons, like something out of a nightmare. They used the darkness as a weapon, striking from shadows and vanishing before the Valyrians could respond. They set traps that killed whole squads. At once, they fought in ways that made no military sense, sacrificing themselves to take out enemy positions, charging into certain death just to inflict a few more casualties. By the time the sun rose on the Valyrian camp, a quarter of their ground forces were dead. High Commander the Xeron stood in the ruins of his command post, staring at the carnage around him. Bodies of his soldiers lay everywhere, torn apart by weapons he did not understand. Blood stained the red soil of Mars, and even darker shade. How, he whispered, how is this possible? Cathabara approached him, her uniform torn and dirty from the fighting. We captured one of them, High Commander. A human soldier. He was wounded, unable to escape. Bring him to me. They dragged the human before the Xeron. He was small compared to Valerian, with soft brown skin and dark eyes that showed no fear. His armor was damaged and his body was broken, but he looked up at the High Commander with something that might have been amusement. You are dying, the Xeron said. Your wounds are fatal. Tell me what I want to know, and I will end your pain quickly. How many of you are there? Where are your bases? What weapons do you have? The human laughed. It was a wet, painful sound bubbling up from lungs that were filling with blood, but there was genuine humor in it. You really do not understand, do you? The human said, you think this is a war. You think you can win by killing enough of us, by finding our bases and destroying our weapons. But this is not a war, this is an extinction event, and you are the ones going extinct. You are the ones dying, the Xeron shouted. Your people are being slaughtered. Yes, the human agreed. We are dying and we do not care. He coughed, spraying blood across the ground. That is what you cannot understand. That is what makes us different from every other species you have conquered. We are not afraid of death. We welcome it. Every human who dies fighting you is a hero. Every human who takes one of you with them is a legend. He looked up at the Xeron with those dark, fearless eyes. You can kill all of us and it will not matter, because the next generation will remember, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. We will keep coming for you forever, until one of our species is dust and memories, and it will not be us. The human died with a smile on his face. The Xeron stood over the body for a long time, trying to understand what he had heard. It made no sense to him. How could a species not care about its own survival? How could individuals embrace death so easily? It went against everything he knew about life, about evolution, about the basic drive to continue existing. But deep in his heart he was beginning to understand the truth. The warnings had been real. The stories had been true. The humans were not just another species to conquer. They were something else entirely. They were a predator that had been sleeping, and now it was awake in the command bunker beneath the Alps. Admiral Chen received reports of the Mars engagement. The numbers were good, better than expected. The Valerians were dying faster than predicted, their morale breaking under the weight of an enemy they could not understand. The second fleet will arrive in 89 days. Stone reported, should we finish off the first fleet before then? Chen considered the question. Part of her wanted to end it now, to destroy every Valerian ship in the system and send a message to the rest of the galaxy. But another part of her knew that this was an opportunity. No, she finally said, let them survive a little longer. Let them send reports back to the Dominion. Let them describe what they are facing. The more afraid the second fleet is when they arrive, the easier they will be to break. She pulled up a display showing human forces throughout the solar system. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, weapons that could crack planets and destroy stars. We have been hiding for 10,000 years, pretending to be primitive, pretending to be weak, but we have not been wasting That time we have been building, preparing, waiting for this moment. She looked at the faces of her officers, men and women who had dedicated their lives to this cause. The Valyrians came here thinking they would conquer a helpless planet. They will leave here knowing that they awakened a sleeping giant, and that giant is very, very angry. Outside in the cold darkness of space, the hunting continued. Human ships moved through the void like sharks through water, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. The first fleet bled and died, unable to fight back against an enemy they could not see or understand. And somewhere in the depths of the solar system, ancient weapons were being prepared, weapons that had not been used in 10,000 years, weapons that would show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The Valyrians had wanted a war. They were about to get one. The Second Fleet arrived on the 92nd day. 600 warships dropped out of faster than light travel at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming with the power of the Valyrian dominion. They were the pride of the empire, crewed by veterans of 100 campaigns, armed with weapons that had crushed civilizations. Grand Admiral Vethkoren stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Unbreakable Will. She was old for a Valyrian, with gray skin that had darkened almost to black, and eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. She had been fighting wars since before the Xeron was born. Status report, she ordered. Her officers scrambled to obey. All ships have arrived safely, Grand Admiral. We are detecting the remains of the First Fleet near the fourth planet. Approximately 100 ships still operational. 100 ships. The Xeron had started with 400. Vethkoren felt a cold anger building in her chest. How had such a disaster happened? How had a primitive species destroyed 3/4 of a Valyrian fleet? Open a channel to High Commander. The Xeron. The face of the Xeron appeared on her screen. He looked terrible. His uniform was torn and dirty. His eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles. He had the look of someone who had not slept in weeks. Grand Admiral, he said, his voice hollow. Thank the ancestors you have arrived. What happened here, High Commander? Your reports were unclear. The Xeron laughed, but there was no humor in it. My reports were unclear because I do not understand what happened. The humans, they are not what we expected. They are not what anyone expected. Explain. They have weapons we cannot detect. Ships that are invisible to our sensors. Soldiers who do not fear death. They have turned this entire system into a trap, and we walked right into it. He paused, struggling to find the words. Grand Admiral, I have fought in 30 campaigns. I have never seen anything like this. They do not fight like soldiers. They fight like something that has evolved specifically to kill. Vethkoren frowned. You are saying that a species that cannot even leave their own solar system has defeated the finest fleet in the Dominion? I am saying that everything we believed about the humans was wrong. The warnings were true. The stories were true. We should never have come here. The Dominion does not retreat, High Commander. Then the Dominion will die. Here the Xeron shouted. Do you not understand? They have been waiting for us. They have been preparing for thousands of years. Every asteroid is a weapon. Every moon is a fortress. They knew we were coming before we even left Valyrian space. Vethkoren cut the transmission. She had heard enough. All ships advanced toward the inner system. She ordered, standard conquest. Formation. We will destroy these humans and show the galaxy what happens to those who resist the Dominion. The Second Fleet moved forward, a wall of metal and fire that stretched across millions of kilometers. They were confident, they were powerful, they were completely unprepared for what was about to happen. The first attack came from behind ships that had been hiding in the Oort cloud, the vast shell of ice and rock that surrounded the solar system emerged from their concealment and struck. They were faster than anything the Valyrians had ever seen, moving in patterns that seemed random but were actually calculated to cause maximum confusion. 30 Valyrian ships died in the first 5 minutes. Their crews never even saw what killed them. Vethkorin watched her display in shock as her fleet began to take fire from every direction. Where are they coming from? She demanded. Find the source of those attacks. We cannot, Grand Admiral. They are everywhere. The entire system is shooting at us. It was true. Hidden weapons platforms on asteroids opened fire with kinetic projectiles that moved too fast to track. Missile batteries on distant moons launched swarms of warheads that saturated defensive systems. Ships that seemed to appear from nowhere struck at vulnerable points and then vanished before anyone could respond. The Valyrians fought back. Their weapons were powerful and they scored hits on the human forces, but for every human ship they destroyed, they lost 10 of their own. The math was simple and terrible. They were losing. Grand Admiral, an officer shouted, "We are detecting a massive energy buildup near the first planet. Something is happening on Mercury." Vethkorin turned to look at the display. Mercury, the small rocky world closest to the yellow sun, was glowing, not with reflected sunlight but with something else, something artificial, something that was building toward a release. "What is that?" she whispered. The answer came a moment later when a beam of pure solar energy lanced across the system and struck her fleet. The solar lance was humanity's ultimate weapon built into the surface of Mercury 10,000 years ago. It drew power directly from the sun and focused it into a beam of destruction that nothing could withstand. It had never been used in combat until now. The first shot destroyed 40 ships. They simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energy that exceeded the output of a small star. The second shot killed another 30. The third and fourth shots tore through the heart of the Valyrian formation, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of gas and debris. Vethkorin watched her fleet die and felt something she had never experienced before in her long career. Fear. "Retreat," she ordered. "All ships retreat. Get out of range of that weapon." The fleet tried to obey, but retreating was harder than advancing. The human shadow ships harried them from every direction, picking off stragglers and crippling damaged vessels. The asteroid weapons continued to fire. The solar lance struck again and again, each shot erasing dozens of ships from existence. By the time the Valyrians reached the outer system, they had lost 400 ships. In less than 6 hours, humanity had destroyed more Valyrian vessels than had been lost in the past century of conquest. Vethkorin stood on her bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of her ambitions. The unbreakable will was damaged, but still functional. Around her, perhaps 200 ships had survived the initial engagement. Grand Admiral, her communications. Officer said, we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, almost peaceful, as if this battle was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Grand Admiral Vethkoren, she said, I hope you now understand the situation you are in. You have won nothing, Vethkoren snarled. The Dominion has thousands more ships. We will return with a fleet that will darken your skies and crush your planet beneath our boots. No, Chen said simply. You will not, you cannot stop us. We already have. Chen leaned forward, and for the first time emotion showed in her eyes. It was not anger or hatred, it was something worse. It was pity. Let me tell you what is going to happen. Grand Admiral, you are going to take your surviving ships and leave this system. You are going to return to the Dominion and tell them exactly what happened here. You are going to describe in detail every weapon you faced, every trap you encountered, every ship you lost. And why would I do that? Because if you do not, we will come to you. Chen's voice was cold as the void between stars. We have been hiding for 10,000 years, but we have not been idle. We have ships that can cross the galaxy in days. We have weapons that can destroy stars. We have soldiers who would rather die than surrender, and we have 10,000 years of rage waiting to be unleashed. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Dominion can send every ship it has. It can throw every soldier, every weapon, every resource at us. And it will not be enough, because we do not fight to win, we fight to destroy. We fight until the enemy is gone, until their worlds are ash and their names are forgotten. That is what we are. That is what we have always been. Vethkoren felt the fear growing in her chest, spreading through her body like poison. What do you want? Peace, Chen said. We want to be left alone. We want the galaxy to know that Earth is not a world to be conquered. We want the warning that your ancestors ignored to be remembered for the next 10,000 years. And if we refuse, if the Dominion decides to fight, Chen smiled, and it was the smile of a predator looking at prey, then we will do to the Dominion what we did to the Zethari. We will hunt you across the galaxy. We will burn your worlds and scatter your people. We will destroy everything you have built, everything you have loved, everything you have ever been. And when we are finished, the only memory of the Valorian Dominion will be a warning to future species. Do not threaten humanity. The transmission ended. Vethkoren stood in silence, her mind racing. She thought about the fleet she had lost. She thought about the weapons she had seen. She thought about the soldiers who had died, screaming in terror as invisible enemies tore them apart. And she made a decision. All ships, she said quietly, set course for Valorian space. We are leaving. Grand Admiral, her first officer, asked, you are ordering a retreat. I am ordering survival. Vethkoren turned to face her bridge crew. We came here to conquer a primitive species. We found something else. Something that has been waiting in the dark, watching us, preparing for this moment. Something that we cannot defeat. She looked at the display where the distant blue dot of Earth hung peacefully against the stars. The humans are not prey, they are the hunters. They have always been the hunters, and we are fools for forgetting that. The Second Fleet limped out of the Sol system, carrying fewer than 200 ships. and tens of thousands of wounded soldiers. They left behind the wreckage of nearly 1,000 vessels, the graves of millions of their comrades, and the shattered remains of Valorian pride. On Earth, the celebrations began. Humanity had faced its first alien invasion and had won. The shadow that had hung over the species for 10,000 years was finally lifted. They could stop hiding, they could stop pretending, they could be what they had always been. But Admiral Chen did not celebrate. She stood in the command center, watching the Valorian fleet retreat, and felt no joy, only a cold satisfaction and an awareness of what was coming next. "General Stone," she said, "begin preparations for Phase 2. Phase 2, Admiral. The Valorians will tell the galaxy what happened here. They will describe our weapons, our tactics, our psychology. Some species will take the warning seriously. They will leave us alone, and we will leave them alone." She turned away from the display, her face hard as iron. "But others will not. Others will think they can succeed where the Valorians failed. Others will come to test us, to challenge us, to try to conquer the sleeping giant." She walked toward the exit, her boots echoing on the ancient floor. "We need to be ready for them. We need to show the galaxy that this was not a fluke, not luck, not a one-time victory. We need to show them that humanity is the apex predator of this universe, and that we will never be prey again." Stone watched her go, a chill running down his spine. He had served under many commanders in his career, but he had never met anyone quite like Chen Weilan. She had the same look in her eyes that the ancient warriors must have had, the ones who slept in their frozen chambers, waiting for war. The look of a hunter who had finally found worthy prey. Outside, in the vast cemetery of space, debris from the battle drifted slowly through the void. Pieces of Valorian ships, fragments of human weapons, the frozen bodies of soldiers from both sides, locked forever in the darkness between worlds. It was a monument to human victory, a warning to anyone who might follow. And somewhere in the depths of the solar system, hidden in places that no sensor could find, the ancient weapons went back to sleep. They had done their job. They had defended Earth. They would rest now, conserving their power, waiting for the next enemy foolish enough to threaten humanity. The waiting had ended. The hunting had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Sol. The Eternal Conquest drifted near the orbit of Neptune, a broken monument to Valorian arrogance. Its engines were dead. Its weapons were destroyed. Its shields had failed weeks ago. It was a corpse of a ship kept alive only by emergency power and the stubbornness of its crew. High Commander the Zarin sat in what remained of his command chair, staring at nothing. Around him the bridge was dark and cold. Most of his officers were dead. The survivors huddled in small groups, conserving heat and oxygen, waiting for an end that seemed to be taking forever to arrive. He had refused to retreat. With Grand Admiral Vethkorin pride, he had told himself at the time, honor, the Dominion does not run. But now, alone in the dark, he knew the truth. He had stayed because he could not accept what had happened. He could not accept that everything he had believed about the universe was wrong. The humans had destroyed him, not just his fleet, not just his soldiers, but his understanding of reality itself. He had been the greatest military commander in the Dominion. He had never lost a battle. He had believed truly, believed that nothing in the galaxy could stand against Valorian might. Humans had proven him wrong in every possible way. High Commander, Kithvara's voice came from somewhere in the darkness. She was the only senior officer still alive. We are detecting an approaching vessel. The Zarin did not move. Human. Yes. Then it does not matter. We cannot fight. We cannot run. Let them come. Kithvara said nothing more. And there was nothing to say. The human shuttle docked with the Eternal Conquest 20 minutes later. Its airlock connected with a hiss of pressurization, and then the inner door opened, letting in light that hurt the Zarin's eyes after so long. In the dark, figures moved through the airlock. Human soldiers in powered armor, their weapons ready but not aimed. They spread through the bridge, checking corners, securing the room with the efficiency of professionals who had done this 1,000 times before. And then she entered. Admiral Chen Weilan, commander of the Earth Defense Force, the woman who had orchestrated the destruction of 2 Valorian armadas. She was smaller than the Zarin had expected, shorter than most of her soldiers, with a slim build that seemed almost fragile compared to Valorian physiology. But there was something in the way she carried herself, something in her eyes, that made her seem larger than any being he had ever met. Power, not physical power, but something deeper. The power of someone who had faced the worst the universe could offer and had not only survived but conquered. She walked across the ruined bridge until she stood before the Zarin. For a long moment neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, predator and prey, victor and vanquished. High Commander, the Zarin, Chen finally said, "I am Admiral Chen Weilan. I believe you know why I am here." "To kill me," the Zarin replied. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. "To finish what you started." "No." Chen reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data tablet. She held it out to him. "I am here to give you a message for the Dominion, for the galaxy." The Zarin looked at the tablet, but did not take it. "What message could you possibly have that I would want to deliver?" "The most important message in the history of your species." Chen's voice was calm, almost gentle. "The message that will determine whether the Valorian Dominion survives the next decade." Despite himself, the Zarin felt curiosity stir in his chest. He reached out and took the tablet. The screen lit up, showing text in the standard galactic language. He read it slowly, his 4 eyes moving across the words with growing disbelief. When he finished, he read it again, then a 3rd time. "This is..." He struggled to find the words. "This is impossible." "It is not impossible," Chen said. "It is a choice that your people need to make." The message was simple. It laid out in clear terms what had happened in the Sol system: the destruction of the First Fleet, the devastation of the Second Fleet, the weapons that humanity possessed, the capabilities that they had demonstrated. But it went further than that. It described humanity's history, their wars, their technology, the civilization they had built 10,000 years ago, and the choice they had made to hide it from the galaxy. And it offered a deal. Earth would enter the galactic community. Humanity would share some of their technology, enough to benefit all species. They would not seek conquest or domination. They would be peaceful. Neighbors, trading partners, allies, against common threats. But in exchange, certain things had to be understood. Earth was not to be threatened ever. Any species that attacked human space would be destroyed completely and without mercy. This was not a negotiation. This was not a warning. This was a simple statement of fact. Humanity was the apex predator of the galaxy. They had chosen to be peaceful, but they had not forgotten how to hunt. And if they were ever forced to hunt again, they would not stop until their enemies were extinct. You expect me to deliver this to the Dominion? Texerin asked. To tell my leaders that they must accept human dominance. I expect you to tell them the truth. Chen replied. I expect you to describe what you saw here, the weapons, the tactics, the psychology. I expect you to make them understand what they are dealing with. They will not accept this. Valorians do not surrender. We do not bow to other species. Then Valorians will die. Chen's voice did not change, but something in her eyes grew colder. Make no mistake, High Commander, I am offering your species a chance to survive. Nothing more. If the Dominion chooses war, we will give them war, and when it is over, there will be no Dominion left to remember the choice they made. Texerin stared at her for a long time. He thought about everything he had seen in the past 3 months, the ships appearing from nowhere, the weapons that could not be stopped, the soldiers who embraced death like an old friend. He thought about the human prisoner he had captured on Mars, the one who had died with a smile on his face. He thought about the look in that human's eyes, the absolute certainty that his species would win no matter how many of them had to die. And he realized finally that he believed. I will deliver your message, he said quietly, but I have a question first. Ask, why did your people hide 10,000 years ago? You were the most powerful species in the galaxy. You could have ruled everything. Why did you choose to become primitive? Chen was quiet for a moment, as if considering how to answer. When she spoke, her voice was softer than it had been before. Because power corrupts, High Commander. We saw what we had done to the Zithari, and we were horrified. We had become monsters, destroying everything in our path without thought or mercy. We looked at ourselves and did not like what we saw. She walked to the viewing window and looked out at the stars. Our ancestors decided that humanity needed to grow up. We needed to learn compassion, empathy, wisdom. We needed to become something better than what we were, so they buried our technology and let us start over, hoping that when we finally returned to the stars, we would be worthy of the power we possessed. And are you worthy? Chen turned back to face him, and for the first time he saw something like doubt in her eyes. I do not know, she admitted. We are still the same species that nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times over. We still have the same capacity for violence, the same love of war, the same willingness to kill. But perhaps we have learned something in the past 10,000 years. Perhaps we can be more than just predators. She walked back toward the airlock, her soldiers falling in behind her. Deliver the message, High Commander. Give your people a chance to live in peace with us, because the alternative. She paused at the doorway and looked back at him one last time. The alternative is extinction. And I would rather not add another species to humanity's list of victims. She left, the airlock closed behind her, and Texeron sat alone in the darkness of his ruined ship, holding a tablet that contained the future of his entire species. 1 week later, the message was delivered to the Elder Council of the Valorian Dominion. It caused an uproar that lasted for days. Some demanded revenge, some demanded surrender, some demanded more information before any decision was made. In the end, they chose survival. The Valorian Dominion officially recognized Earth as a sovereign world, not subject to conquest or colonization. They agreed to peace, to trade, to diplomatic relations. They agreed to spread the message to every other species in the galaxy. Earth was not to be touched, not. Everyone listened, of course. In the years that followed, other species tested humanity's resolve. The Krethman hegemony sent a small fleet to probe Earth's defenses. It was destroyed in less than an hour. The Ythra Collective attempted to kidnap human colonists for study. Every ship involved vanished without a trace, and the Collective's homeworld received a warning that the next attempt would result in their sun being destroyed. Gradually, the galaxy learned to respect the small blue planet at the edge of the Orion Spur. Humanity emerged from isolation and took their place among the stars, trading with some species, allying with others, and keeping everyone at arm's length. Ambassador Yethkrol of the Kreth Collective watched these developments from his homeworld with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. He had warned the Valorians. He had tried to prevent this disaster, but part of him had always known that it was inevitable. Sooner or later, someone was going to wake the sleeping giant. His aide Shavin approached him as he stood looking at the stars. Ambassador, the humans have requested a meeting. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Collective. Yethkrol nodded slowly. I expected they would. The humans are not fools. They know they cannot remain isolated forever. They will need allies in the centuries to come. Should we accept? Yes, but carefully. Yethkrol turned away from the window. The humans are unlike any species the galaxy has ever seen. They are capable of great kindness and great cruelty, often at the same time. They can be the best of friends or the worst of enemies. He began walking toward his office, his ancient bones creaking with each step. We will ally with them because we have no choice, because the alternative is to become their enemy, and we have seen what happens to those who oppose humanity. But we will never forget what they are. We will never forget the fire that burns inside them. And what is that? Ambassador. Yethkrol stopped at his door and looked back at his young aide. They are predators, Shavin. The most dangerous predators this galaxy has ever produced. For 10,000 years they slept, they dreamed of peace, they tried to become something gentler, something kinder. He opened the door and stepped through. But they are awake now, and the galaxy will never be the same. On Earth, the celebrations had finally ended. Life was returning to normal, or as normal as it could be now that humanity knew it was not alone in the universe. People went back to their jobs, their families, their ordinary lives, but beneath the surface, things had changed. Forever, the bunkers were still manned. The weapons were still ready. Soldiers who had fought in the Battle of Sol were training new generations, passing on the skills and knowledge that had defeated two armadas. Admiral Chen stood on a balcony, overlooking the mountains of Switzerland, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. The war was over, at least for now, but she knew it would not last. Peace never did. Sooner or later, another threat would emerge, another species would test humanity's strength, another war would be fought. General Stone joined her on the balcony. The Dominion has accepted our terms. The other major powers are falling in line. It looks like we might actually have peace for a while. Perhaps, Chen said, but we should not count on it. The galaxy is vast, and there are always those who believe they can succeed where others have failed. Then we will teach them the same lesson we taught the Valorians. Yes. Chen watched the last light fade from the sky. We will. She thought about everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. Humanity had emerged from 10,000 years of hiding and had declared itself to the galaxy. They had shown their strength, their will, their absolute refusal to be conquered, but they had also shown something else. In the message she had sent to the Dominion, she had offered peace, trade, alliance. She had extended a hand to the species that had tried to destroy them, offering a future built on cooperation rather than conflict, not because she was weak, but because she remembered why humanity had hidden in the first place, because she knew that power without wisdom led only to destruction, because she hoped, despite everything, that humanity could be more than just killers. We have a choice to make, she said quietly. We can be the predators the galaxy fears, hunting and killing anyone who threatens us, or we can be something more, something better. Protectors rather than destroyers. Allies rather than enemies. Can we be both? Stone asked. Chen smiled, and for the first time in months it was a genuine smile. I hope so, Marcus, I really hope so. Below them, the lights of human cities began to flicker on, driving back the darkness. Billions of people lived in those cities, going about their lives, unaware of the wars that had been fought to protect them. But the soldiers knew, the commanders knew, the men and women who had stood against the alien invasion and had one knew the truth. Humanity was no longer hiding. They were no longer pretending. They were awake, they were powerful, and they were ready to face whatever the universe threw at them. The galaxy had been warned to stay away from Earth. The Valorians had ignored that warning, and their overconfidence had brought ruin to their armadas. But the warning still stood. It would stand forever, because humanity was watching, humanity was waiting, and humanity never forgot. The stars would remember this day, the day the sleeping giant woke, the day the hunters returned, the day everything changed. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, where the debris of two fleets drifted silently through the void, a single piece of metal caught the light of the distant sun. It was a fragment of a Valorian warship, one of thousands scattered across the solar system, a monument to arrogance, a warning to the future, and a promise of what would happen to anyone foolish enough to threaten Earth again.